Okay, all right. Well, welcome. I'm here to talk about my recently released book, Strait, Talk About the Future of Humanity. Will our intelligence save us or destroy us? Before I get started, I want to sort of survey your feelings on our future. And I want everyone to vote for one of these two emojis. If you're positive about the future, no worries. You can give me a thumbs up. Otherwise, you can just hold up your hand. So anyone who really positive about the future, not worried about anything, thumbs up. Nobody? Oh, thumbs down. We got a thumbs down. Well, okay. Well, hands up if you are worried about the future. Okay, it's a unanimous vote. Usually it's a 50-50 in classes I've taught, but you're a very intelligent crowd. Okay, so I'm going to give just a very brief overview of my book, very high level. I'm going to start by talking about how did we get here to this position where we have to worry about our future, talk about the future risks to humanity, roadblocks that are keeping us from making progress, and very briefly on possible solutions, and then I'll open up for questions and discussions. So how did we get here? To understand that, you need to know a little bit about our family history. 300,000 years ago, as Homo sapiens appeared on the scene, we were the last human species to evolve. And because of our superior intelligence that allowed us to work in large groups, we eventually wiped out our human cousins and took out a few large mammals along the way as we spread across the planet. But very small numbers of us, and we had no more impact than any other large mammal at that time. 12,000 years ago, and notice the gap, we were probably a bit slow learners here, but we figured out that we could plant seeds in the soil, cultivate plants, herd animals, and this allowed us to have a stable food source, stay in one place, which allowed human populations to grow more rapidly. But there was only about 5 million of us, 5 million of us on the planet at that time, so our impact was negligible. The big event happened about 200 years ago. The Industrial Revolution changed everything about humanity. It made us much more productive, made us much more rich per capita. It improved sanitation and health dramatically and lifespan. So that's where we started growing like a weed in our population explosion that started then, hitting 1 billion in the early 1800s. And now we're 8 billion and counting today. And we're the most dominant force on the planet because of that. One more revolution I'll talk about, and I remember this personally in the 70s when the personal computers came out. And you remember, Carl, right? Us old guys remember that. And and this information revolution gave more access to knowledge than any other time in history. Of course, access to knowledge doesn't equate to wisdom. But this laid the foundation for the artificial intelligence revolution, which I talk about quite a bit in the book, and I'll talk about a little bit today. So let's get to the future risks of humanity. So start with environmental risks. So the bottom line is we've got too many people consuming too much stuff and destroying the planet. The planet is in worse shape than it's ever been. Our resource consumption per person is higher than it's ever been. And of course, we have more people than we've ever had. So the quintessential question from a humanities standpoint is this going, as we get to 10 to 12 billion, which is what's projected, and we keep increasing our resource consumption per person, which is expected, will the planet be able to support us? And that is the question that we'll find out. There's a lot of information in my book about that, several chapters that I'm just crunching together in one short statement. But of course, we've all heard about climate change, about the truth and misinformation about it. The planet is getting hotter. It is expected to get even hotter, and our climate is going to become more unstable. The good news is that if you look at what most scientists expect in the near future, this isn't going to wipe out humanity, at least in the short term, but it will cause a lot of damage, a lot of grief, a lot of expense. And if you're a person living in a less developed nation, you're probably going to suffer a lot more than the rest of us because you don't have the resources to take this on. So serious problem. Not going to wipe us out anytime soon, maybe in the long term, we don't know, but of course now we're going to kick it up a notch, nuclear weapons. We have reduced the number of nuclear weapons from I think it was 60,000 warheads in the 80s. But now we're down to 12, 13,000, I think. But we still have plenty to wipe out humanity. And the doomsday clock that sort of measures the threat of nuclear war is set closer to midnight than its entire 47-year history now because of the conflict in Ukraine and the tensions with China. So let's not forget about this. This is something that was very popular when I was a child and we had to do all those drills in school, but it's still with us and very much a threat. Genetic engineering. So genetic engineering is very useful. It helps with agricultural issues and medical issues, and there's a lot of promise for it in the future. But the concern is that you can use the same technology, a rogue individual or rogue group could use this technology to make a killer virus that could wipe out humanity. All of this. Now, COVID was interesting because maybe I shouldn't say this on film, but if you want to make a killer virus, it needs three major components. It needs to be highly contagious, which COVID was. It needs to be slow acting, which COVID was. So it spreads before you know it and you can't contain it. It needs to be highly lethal, which COVID wasn't. The lethality of COVID was 2 or 3% max. So if I were China or someone else that wanted to test out my killer virus, COVID would have been a good result. Because you don't want to wipe out humanity in the test case, you just want to see if you can spread it all over the world, which is highly successful. Did everyone get COVID? Well, maybe I shouldn't ask health questions, but it was very effective. Artificial intelligence. So this is really interesting. Artificial intelligence is expected to change our lives as much as the Industrial Revolution did. And you could spend all day talking about those anticipated changes, both good and bad. In fact, I put a presentation into a TED Talk in Madrid that's on that topic. So hopefully I can get that talk. But the concern is that through either a coding error or a malicious manipulation, artificial intelligence considers us human a threat and turns against us, sort of like in the Terminator movie. Except without naked Arnold Schwarzeneggers coming from the future, real Terminators.
Or it could be used by a certain group of humans to eliminate the other humans that they don't like.
Yes.
Now you think that's more possible.
Yes.
More
Yes.
possible
There's
future.
Yeah. Or AI can trick humans to do its bidding for it. There's all sorts of things. That's a rich area of inquiry. Before I continue and rank these risks, I want to make a couple of definitions. A catastrophic risk is one that impacts a significant population. Like I consider 1/3 the human population as a threshold for catastrophic risks in my book. And an existential risk is basically ends humanity. This is the more common definition, but I think this is a useful definition as well, because this is also an important event. So these are the odds and the ranking of all these risks that I came up with. I'm not the first person to do this, so I'll talk about past efforts. So I rank nuclear weapons, genetic engineering, and artificial intelligence at the top, at equal existential and catastrophic risks. I rank them in this order because nuclear weapons are with us today. Genetic engineering is 5 to 15 years out. And artificial intelligence, the real threat is 25 to 50 years out. And that's a real guesstimate because there's a lot of different opinions on that. Environmental, climate change, and miscellaneous risks, which I didn't talk about because it's just not enough time. The next tier, and then, which is about the order of magnitude less risk, but still significant. A 1 in 100 risk is about what happened in Valencia with the floods. That was at least a 1 in 100 flood event. So these are things that happen. It doesn't mean it might happen in 100 years. It means you have a 1% chance it can happen every year, which is a different calculation.
In the past flood in the 60s, over 1,000 people were killed.
Yeah.
So that's.
And you could have another one next year. That's the way it
Yeah.
works. There's a 1% chance every year.
Yeah, maybe 1 in 100 might be okay.
Natural threats are an order of magnitude higher, and this is an odds that can be calculated looking at historic. So meteors, supervolcanoes, but it's a much lower level risk than these others. If you sum them up, catastrophic risks are 1 in 3 in 100 years, 1 in 30 existential risks, and 100 years, which are high risks. These are higher risks than you take driving your car, getting shot by a gun in the United States. These are very high level risks. So other people have done this in the past. So Martin Rees, who is a world-renowned scientist that lives in the UK, he's at Cambridge University now, I think. He wrote this book in 2003, 2004, and he gave humanity a 1 in 2 chance of surviving the next century. It was sort of a seat of the pants guesstimate, but he's a smart guy. Toby Ord, who worked at the Oxford Institute for the Future of Humanity, did a little more detailed analysis, looking at surveys of experts and other data sources. And he gave us a 1 in 6 chance of an existential threat over the next century, which is the same odds as playing Russian roulette. So I'm a little more conservative, but still all of these odds are concerning. So why are we not making more progress? A lot of reasons. One is life is good. And when life is good, it's hard to think about there's a disaster looming around the corner. This is the title of a journal article by an environmental psychologist who listed all the psychological reasons people don't participate in climate change and other environmental causes. So things like, if they're not going to do it in China, I don't feel like doing it. I don't want it in my backyard. These sorts of things. There's 29 of them. So there's a lot of them there. One of my favorites, misinformation and distraction. We've got a fire hose of misinformation. We've got a fire hose of information that you're drowning in. It's hard to think about what's important or sort out what's important. When you combine that with divisiveness, it's hard to get anything done. If you don't know the truth, and you're divisive about it. And by the way, divisiveness has greatly increased over the past 20 years. There's a lot of data showing that this is a recent history, that this level of divisiveness we're experiencing today. And the final reason is something called the Church of Technology, where we believe that technology will solve all our problems, which keeps us from doing what we should do to prepare for the future. So possible solutions. I'm only going to talk about one concept here, just to save time, because this is the tough part, right? If it was easy, we would have already solved these problems. So, but this is one of the better ideas that I talk about. There's a group associated with the Club of Rome, and they've used advanced computer models to project the future of humanity for 50 years. So in 1970s, they produced a book called The Limits of Growth, which was a landmark environmental book at the time. And they've been working on these things for 50 years. This is their latest projection report using the Earth 3 model. And so if we do more of the same, we're going to go down. And this is the same thing they've been saying for 50 years. And if we want to have a safe and sustainable future, we need to work smarter, which is different than working harder, being very environmentally strict, resource restriction, because that pushes the economy down. And when the economy's down, people don't care about the environment anymore. So very interesting report, and of course, working smarter seems like a good idea to me, but it's not happening. So I'll open up the floor for questions and discussion, and thank you very much. I'm going to open this door because
Lo hecho más veces, ¿eh? ¿Cómo sería en
It's
inglés?
not your first time talking.
No,
No?
I did that. No, I was a professor for almost 30 years. So. I'm better at talking than sitting in class. I really hate sitting in class. It's much easier to teach. Yes.
Yeah, well, that was great, and a good overview of the book, and also a good overview of the issues. So how do you not get completely depressed, and what do you think we in this room should do?
Well, don't assume I'm not. By the way, Tara helped me tremendously on the book. She was one of my readers and gave me tremendous feedback, whipped my book into shape. So thank you for that. Well, don't assume I'm not getting depressed. I mean, in fact, I wrote an op-ed that the title was, "Is Humanity Really Worth Saving?" It's a reaction to recent events. And the answer is yes. See how hard that was to say. The answer is yes, because otherwise it's unuseful and unethical, essentially. And even if you try, it's the act of trying that makes me a better person. And if it all goes to nothing, at least I did what I could in my own life. Otherwise, I'll really be depressed, and you'll be throwing coins in my box on the street. So, what was the second part?
Oh, just what should we all do? What should we do?
Well, I think it's good to. It's good for your own soul not to give up. So whatever you are doing and you want to do, continue doing it, and that's all you can do. And if that makes you feel better, then that's a good thing. That's how I get past my depression. That way. It makes me feel better, because when I think about giving up, I feel horrible. And so, and then what am I going to do? I'm retired. And Sally's very busy with her school. And so, like pickleball all day? Don't really want to do that. Or what other retirees do,
That's a solution.
A little bit anyway.
Well, a little bit's good. But believe me, there's a lot of drinking going on out there in the retiree world. It's embarrassing.
So I'm preparing a talk for young people to get motivated to get into sustainability and sustainability jobs. What would be your message for young people to get, use all that young energy to work in sustainability?
Well, I think the message is we can make a difference, and so if we don't, then things might not go well for them. So, but that's, I think the positive message for young people works better.
I'm trying to make it.
There's a book out there called, came out at the same time as my book, called "It's Not the End of the World." That's done by a data scientist who looks at the positive data that's out there. So maybe that's a good book to get young people into. I try to take a balanced book view. My book is not written for young people, so I take sort of more of a balanced view. Like, we got a lot of issues we got to work on, but we're not without hope. It's sort of my message. Young people, I think, need, and there's a lot of resources out there for young people in sustainability. So I think we can make a difference.
I'm going to check out that book.
Yeah, check it out. Yeah,
Thank you.
after you read my book.
Both.
Yes. Any other questions? Yes.
There's speaking about the positive side of things, there's a book out that was recommended by Bill Gates for people. I think he paid for the book for anybody who graduated from the university in the year that the book was put out, or that he found out about it. It was written by a Danish guy, and I don't remember the title of it.
I know who you're talking about.
But it's basically a book that most people think that the world is in much worse shape than it is in terms of, say, third world countries and where they are in educating their people, and where they are as far as advancing technologically. And I'd say everything except
It's
as
called
far
the
as I
skeptical
know.
environmentalist or something like that.
It's basically the point of the book is that people think the world is way worse off than it is from that point of view of certain point of view of how educated people are, and how things like women's rights are changing and things like that. And in general, that the world is changing positively for those things.
Yes, yeah. And unfortunately,
the political stuff, I don't agree with. I think it's changed much for the worse.
well, also a lot of things have improved, but if you and that's fine. But I think, as I point out in my book, if you look at the global level indicators, those are not going in the right direction. And so, accept the wins, but keep in mind we've got there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
And so, I think that book in particular, I think paints. He's really an anti-environmentalist, and the head of the National Science Foundation really went after him on his work.
I think last name starts with an R, but I can't remember.
Yeah. But it might not be the same person that I'm thinking of, but
I
book,
remember.
the skeptical environmentalist was.
I think there is a guy called Steven Pinker.
Pinker, Pinker. He's a psychologist.
He's a
He looks at
psychologist.
violence over. That's a good book.
Yes, he argues more or less the same, using statistics and data that we are living nowadays the best of times, comparing with
That's true.
Middle Age or 200 years ago.
Well, that's true. Yeah. And that's a very big book. I mean, it's hard to go through. But it's he's looking at violence.
Yes.
And of course, we don't go to the village square to see beheadings anymore. So,
Yay.
by the way, you know that bread knives don't have a sharp end because it's in his book. It's the history behind that, because people used to regularly stab each other sitting at the table. It was not, and so they took the end off the knives so that people wouldn't stab each other so much at the table. So that's interesting.
So-
So,
Do you have some ideas of how could the society could change in order to be less
Well-
near of the
The end.
yeah,
Distinction.
I think so. I think as the report I talked about said, that we got to be smarter. You know, we can't, you know, we have to use our best of knowledge. We can't fall for misinformation campaigns. We have to do what's best for ourselves and others in the global community, instead of just, well, what's best for me and heck with the rest of them sort of attitude. So basically, in a nutshell, I would say we need to become a more altruistic, globally cooperative, smarter society. And there are plenty of smart people out there. It's just that they're not being listened to.
Exactly, that's the problem.
Yeah, and so there's not much, there's a sort of an anti-establishment, anti-scientific, anti-respect of experts trend that's not good for humanity and our planet, I think, ultimately. So, any other questions?
No, I'd just like to say I have very small classes, so I'm not talking about a typical chunk of youngsters, but when I ask in class if they are worried about the future and what things worry them, they don't mention any of these issues. And if then I put forward the question, well, what about, oh yeah, no, sorry, that's nothing to worry about.
Well, that's an easier position to live with, isn't it?
But they don't even think about it.
I know.
I leave a pause, nothing else.
Yeah. Well, I'm not suggesting we spend all day thinking about this like I do, because it's not pleasant.
No, but for them, they're the ones it's going to affect, and I'm surprised that none of them think, maybe we should do something about it.
It's just not, for example, Greta, the climate.
Greta Thunberg?
Thunberg, yes.
Yeah.
She has like 25 million followers on Instagram, and Kaylee,
Tyler.
Kaylee has like 250 million. So it's just, they get, the kids are not, in the top 50 Instagram influencers, there's no one serious in that crowd. Snoop Dogg made the top 50, for God's sake.
He's serious now.
He's getting more serious. I heard that. I've been put in my place about Snoop Dogg
Careful
before.
with
Thank
Snoop,
you.
yes.
But I was surprised, because I thought Snoop Dogg was sort of old school, and he's right in there, But mostly football players of the European kind, and Kylie Jenner's and these sorts of the top 50 influencers. That's who's influencing our children.
Got Musk out there influencing billions, I guess.
Well,
Unfortunately.
if there's no more questions,
Well, now we have to drink. So.
Yeah.